Well, a British Columbian who spent some time covering the Oilers. So glad to have him back on the program here today. How we doing, John?
Great. I'm just trying not to tick everybody off.
You're like the demilitarized zone. You're like the demilitarized zone. You're right in between both factions. Yes. You have the ability to broker peace, perhaps.
Right. Yeah. Look how that works. Between these two cities and these two teams, are you serious?
Yeah.
There's not a chance.
When's the last time you can remember seeing Canadian cities bark at each other like this? Can you remember it?
Well, I lived in Alberta for 15 years. And long before social media, it was not barking between Calgary and Edmonton. It was out and out warfare in so many ways. I remember walking down streets in Calgary with all of our hockey night guys and people rolling down their windows saying, "You're cheering for the Oilers." And then we'd walk down Jasper Avenue and say, "You're cheering for the Flames." So I just turned to the guys and said, we must be doing our job pretty well because everybody's mad at us.
That's it.
And that's all you can do.
Yeah, that's it. Neil McDonald, the longtime foreign correspondent for CBC News, once gave a sessional to my class at Carleton. He said, if I have equal number of Israelis and Palestinians hating on me, then I'm doing my job pretty well. Battle of Alberta 2 years ago. Of course, there were some battles of Ontario where the Senators hated the Leafs and vice versa. And of course, way back when the Battle of Quebec, Nordiques and Habs was pretty spicy.
You just tweet when you talked about the Battle of Ontario, Matty. I was sitting in my office. Roy Malacher, the president of the Ottawa Senators, would phone and say, "Harry Neale hates us." Hey, Harry Neale doesn't hate you. He doesn't even live in Toronto. He lives in Buffalo. Harry Neale hates us. No, he doesn't. He's doing his job. He's telling the truth.
There was a great story that Sean Fitzgerald, who was a terrific reporter, then with the National Post, during the middle of a Battle of Ontario series, called Harry Neale at home. And as the story goes, it might have been after a couple glasses of wine for Harry, and said, "The people in Ottawa think you're biased against the Leafs." And Harry said, "Tell the people in Ottawa to bite my ass."
Yeah. Well, I mean, all those the best iterations.
That was not on John Shannon's watch, I'll have you know.
The best iterations of all those series you just mentioned, though, were all pre-social media, and social media has just added gasoline or a bigger accelerant to the fire than you can possibly imagine. It's just so easy to troll from the comfort of your couch. Never mind going to Jasper. That's what you needed to do. You needed to go down actively to Jasper Avenue to feel it. You don't need to do that now. On your couch, you get to troll everybody.
And to the point where when you are sitting on your sofa watching the game and you think you see something that is observant and you should social media it, you change your mind because it's not worth the crap. It isn't worth it.
I deleted 2 tweets.
I do a lot of that.
I deleted 2 tweets last game.
Yeah.
Literally, no, not worth it.
Yeah,
not worth it.
I laugh every time I went. Like, if you watch my timeline during Oilers Flames or Oilers Canucks games, not very much.
Yeah. I must say, I do that some in the regular season, but in the playoffs, you got to bow up and let it all hang. Bow up. Okay. Hey, John, what do you make of the fact this series is 2-1 Vancouver?
Well, overall, 3 games, Vancouver's been the better team. And, you know, if I would have told you the consistency of Vancouver goaltending was going to be better than the consistency of Edmonton goaltending with Artur Shilov starting game 1, I would have said you were wrong. It's not possible. Well, it's happened. And the other thing is I think the game plan that the Canucks have put in place, the aggressive forecheck, the aggressive checking of McDavid and Draisaitl has paid off. They've done a magnificent job to the point where, this was an issue all season long in Edmonton, is I think you have to separate McDavid and Draisaitl. I don't think you play them together. I think that has to be contemplated again for the Oilers, because you need to be able to create different opportunities. If you put them out there at the same time, for the sake of argument, for 24 minutes, the other 36 minutes are with players that can't command the respect of McDavid and Draisaitl. If you put them separately, then you put 23 minutes for McDavid, 23 minutes for Draisaitl. All of a sudden, you're only worried about compensating 14 minutes. I think this is an obvious thing that I'm sure it's been discussed inside the Edmonton room. and I wouldn't be surprised if we see more of it for the rest of the series.
And they're,
Yeah, well,
they're
especially-
specimens. They're specimens, but they can't play 30 minutes every night. They played 30 minutes the other night, John.
They can.
in a non-overtime game. But there's going to be a law of diminishing returns for those players. If you're Knobloch, like you're putting yourself on the line here with some of these decisions.
I've said it since Connor and Leon started to play together. They are like a drug for a coach, for any coach that was in Edmonton, whether it was, Todd McClellan, Dave Tippett, Kenny Hitchcock, all these guys. Because when they play together, it is just like your adrenaline rush goes up. Everything changes. And so they become some sort of an intoxicating lineup that you feel an obligation you have to go back to. If you use it sparingly, effectively, power plays, coming out of TV timeouts, I think it's a much better scenario for the Edmonton Oilers.
Well, wholeheartedly agree. Particularly since they do not have a goal from a forward, not named McDavid, Hyman, or Draisaitl, although they seem to be getting a lot of goals from the defense and Matthias Ekholm. And now the goaltending decision that Frank Saravelli has reported. Before we get on to goaltending, do you think Knobloch is showing his inexperience here a little bit? Do you think this is a rookie coach in the playoffs who's looking rookie?
No. I don't think so. I mean, I'm a Chris fan. I think Chris has always maintained a composure that has been important to the success of the Oilers. Is there a learning curve? Probably a little bit of a learning curve. But what we're learning again now is the separation between that elite group of guys, as you've talked about, Hyman and McDavid, and the rest of the lineup. And that's what I think is becoming the issue. And how to spread that offense out at key times is important. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins has to be better. Those key guys that have long-term commitments to the Oilers have to be better. And that's one of the things that I think that's not coaching and experience. That's on the players.
Evander Kane, another guy. Yeah.
So Pickard instead of Skinner at this stage of the game. What do you make of that?
I'm not in favor of it. Stuart Skinner's the goaltender of record for a long period of time. Stuart Skinner's had a great season. Stuart Skinner has always fought back after poor games. Calvin Pickard has done yeoman's work for the Oilers this season in a backup role, but I don't think Game 4 of a Stanley Cup playoff series would be described as a backup goalie game.
He's not played a lot of hockey this year either. Is the other concern I would have?
He's played enough.
Yeah,
I'm not worried about that. He's played enough, and he's used to the 8, 9, 10 days off between games and starts. So that doesn't concern me. I just think that this team got to 106 points this year, 108 points with Stuart Skinner as the goalie. I don't think there's a reason to change.
We've asked a bunch of players this recently because the Canucks' own goaltending woes and injuries and such. If it matters who's behind them, do they play differently? To a man, they've always said, no, you just trust that it's your guy. I wonder in the playoffs if that's different. I didn't necessarily pin down that question with in the playoffs, would it matter? And the fact that, really at the start of the season, this was the third stringer as well here. Only the difference is this isn't a 23-year-old up and coming third stringer like Silovs. This is a 32-year-old journeyman third stringer. Do you think it affects the skaters at all, or do they just assume and trust that this guy's going to be good enough?
Well, I think the latter to a certain point, Blake. But what I would say is that I think their eyes are opened. I think that, oh my goodness, what have we put our number one goalie in a position to be sitting on the bench? If anything else, it's just that whether he's told this morning or tonight, the shock of saying, well, it's not Stuart Skinner. Well, we better up our game, and particularly on the blue line, and particularly in their own zone. There can't be terrible giveaways like Warren Fogle had on the other night. They just have to play a safer game. And that might be the one reminder that changing goaltenders will do to a team.
Speaking of goaltenders, John, the Archers Silovs story continues here in Vancouver. We heard from a friend the other day who made a Steve Penny comparison to She Loves. We have become accustomed to goaltenders who aren't necessarily the best in the world getting hot in the Stanley Cup playoffs and taking their team on a bit of a ride. But this She Loves one is a little bit different than your average Bear, given how little NHL experience he had going into this. Do you have to go back to someone like Steve Penny in the mid 80s for the Canadians, maybe even the early 70s with Dryden, to find this sort of story in terms of a young guy with so little experience making his mark in the Stanley Cup?
Being a BC boy and being from the South Okanagan, I think you have to pick at Andy Moog. Andy Moog played 7 games in 1981 for the Edmonton Oilers before he was named the starting goalie in the series against Montreal, and they swept the Canadians. And Andy Moog, that was the start of his NHL career. To me, this is as close to that as any with She Loves. The only thing I would say is that if you think this, and maybe we touched on this, but if you think this is pressure for Arturs Silovs, if you think this is pressure, imagine knowing that there are 500,000 people in downtown Riga celebrating that you won the bronze medal at the World Championships. And you are the hero of the day. You beat the Americans. That's pressure, my friend. And this is, sure, is it intense? Yes, it's intense. It's every second day. It's wild. But Arturs Silovs knows all about pressure. And that's the difference in the game now versus the game 30, 40 years ago, is because the game is so internationally well played now, and goaltenders are coming from all over the world that they feel that pressure when they play for their countries.
And truthfully, he probably believes that being so young now, he'll get another chance to play in the NHL playoffs after tonight. Like he doesn't think this is maybe the pinnacle of his individual career. He might have thought that when he was taking on the Americans for bronze. Like, how many other times is Latvia going to get a chance to win a medal? Maybe you don't get another chance if you're Arturs Silovs.
And remember, Blake, that the game at the Worlds was the first time.
Yeah.
They can never take it away. That's the even greater pressure. Silovs is going to have a long, prosperous career on this side of the pond. And this is just the beginning. And there's a million British Columbians can say that they were along the ride with him. It's a cool story.
Yeah.
John, do we still think that Elias Pettersson has to make his mark on this series for the Canucks to win?
I do. I think there's a part of me that says, it would be a much easier road to hoe for the Canucks if Pettersson contributed. The challenge now, and if we're talking to a Canuck audience, the challenge now is to win this series, is to be healthy, because we know Dallas is going to be healthy. Dallas is winning the other series. Mm-hmm. And Dallas may win it as early as 5 games. You need everybody to contribute to get to a 5-game series for the Canucks, because the Oilers are not going down easy, for sure. In fact, the way things have happened, the emotion of the events, no Carson Soucy, this might have assured a 7-game series now. You need everybody to contribute, and that includes Elias Pettersson.
I don't think a 3-1 series would guarantee anything for the Vancouver Canucks, because if there's any team that's capable of erasing a 3-1 series deficit, I think it would be the Edmonton Oilers, but it sure would be handy, wouldn't it, if you're the Vancouver Canucks?
Yeah. Well, and that becomes there are 5 thematics that exist as long as I've been around the Stanley Cup playoffs since 1977, is that get out of a series healthy, be healthy, go for the sweep, 5 at the max. Mm-hmm. Those teams, and you've seen it in the last few years, Stanley Cup champions, whether it's Vegas, whether it's Colorado, they've always had a sweep or a 5-game series in their runs to the Stanley Cup, and that's so important. I mean, the Rangers were counting their dollars It was going to be a 4-game sweep. They were going to, be resting, waiting for the Florida-Boston series to end. Now it's a totally different story.
All right, last question, Shannon, and it's a tough one, but you're uniquely qualified to ask it, to answer it with your vast experience coast to coast in this country. Which market has the most Homer media core? If you dare.
Vancouver.
Vancouver? What?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. For one reason. By volume alone. By size alone. A larger media core, a louder media core. If you tell me, if you're a coach and you have a choice of saying which media is tougher on my team, and which will be on the bandwagon quicker, by volume alone, Vancouver would do it. Edmonton is still it's not a big media market that way, and there are individual voices that make it that cause a little chaos, but there are more voices in Vancouver which would change that.
See,
hold on a second.
I would argue the smaller one is more in back pocket.
You think Vancouver is the quickest to be Homer and jump on board?
I just, by the way, I think the same is in Toronto. I do.
Have you heard of? You're familiar with Tony Gallagher, right? We had him on the show yesterday.
Tony is one of my favorite people of all time. Are you kidding me?
He was incredible here yesterday. 75 years old, looks great, still as sharp as a tack. All right. Okay.
This is the only organization I know that has banned media members at times.
Well, see,
just because you don't like the answer.
No, I asked.
No.
I guess.
Hey, listen, it's a. And I'll tell you that is, I will say that this goes back to Blake's comment about social media, that the rivalry now is even within the media. I mean, that's how crazy this is. That's how wild this Edmonton Vancouver thing is getting now. It reminds me of the days of the CFL, Maddie, when we were kids. Brian Hall was the voice of the Eskimos. Jim Cox was the voice of the Lions. Kenny Newens was the voice of the Stampeders, and Cactus Jack Wells was in Winnipeg. And if you were a kid watching or listening to the CFL, you hated them all. If you weren't a Lion fan, you hated them all because all they were was homers. And that's what we've got back. We've got the old CFL from the '60s back in 2024. With Vancouver and Edmonton playing in the Stanley Cup playoffs.
That was when you were a kid, Shannon, not me.
But you were in Ottawa, and you were just lucky to have a football team.
Very true. Very true. Lost 2 of them. Buried 2 of them. Wrote the eulogy for one of them. All right. I asked. I got the answer I deserve. Thank you for this, Mr. Shannon. Until next week.
Cheers, boys.
Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres and Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.